It's Friday, December 5th, 1975, and I am in the beautiful mountain retreat owned by John Donald Budge, known, of course, to the tennis world as Don Budge. And Don, I didn't think I could be so happy traveling to Pennsylvania as I've been this morning in anticipation of meeting you.
Well, I'm glad you made it, Bud, and brought your beautiful wife, Faye, along with you. I hope it won't be the last visit here.
Well, thank you. Just wave a snowflake in our direction and we'll be back next month.
If I wave a snowflake, it'll be to get out of here because I'm not a snow lover. I was born in California, so snow and Donald Budge don't get along too well together.
Oakland, as I recall, was your birthplace.
Correct.
And was your first interest in tennis established there?
Yes, it was. I was 15 and entered the California State Championship for boys 15 and under, and to everyone's surprise, managed to win the first tournament I ever entered. And from that point on, the tennis bug bit me.
The bug bit Budge. Can you say that fast 3 times?
Not 3 times, no.
All right. Now, how did the ascendancy go in the juniors?
Well, I had my ups and downs in the 18 and under ranks, being 15, 16, and 17. I had a nemesis out in California named Charlie Hunt. His brother, Joe Hunt, eventually won the national championships by beating Jack Kramer one time in the finals. But my last year in the juniors, I finally figured out how to beat Charlie Hunt, and then went on, of course, to play my eventual doubles partner, Gene Mako, in the finals of the National Junior Championships at Culver. And that was really my biggest thrill up to that point, winning a national championships.
I hadn't realized that you teamed up with Gene that early. But let's go back even earlier. How did you happen to become interested in tennis? Was it promoted by your parents?
No, my parents weren't interested in tennis really at all. My older brother, who was 6 years older than I am, named Lloyd, really loved the game. He was #1 man on the University of California team. And one night at the dinner table, Lloyd said to me, "You'd have a good chance to win this California championships if you'd practice, but you're too damn lazy." So that made me mad, and I went to work and started practicing. And from that point on, tennis became much more important than baseball, basketball, and football, which I also liked as a kid.
What was the field that your parents were engaged in, or your father's job, let's say, or position?
Well, my father was a manager of a laundry, and before that, though, he worked in a newspaper, and my mother, who was a linotype operator in this newspaper, they met and finally eventually got married, and then, of course, had the family. And my father had to leave the printing business because he came to America for his health, and he had to get out and be out in the open or away from the smell of the ink and the presses and all that. So he did have a chance to get into the laundry business and eventually wound up to be the manager of a laundry called the Crystal Laundry.
Well, I think we'll get to some echoes of that a little later.
Right.
But I take it then that you were not brought up in the country club set.
No, I wasn't. Actually, most of the tennis players today, Bud, come from public parks. In the Tilden era, it was mostly a wealthy man's game, and you had to belong to the good clubs and have the tennis lessons and so forth to be heard of in the tennis field. But since, I would say, starting with Ellsworth Vines and Mako and myself and many of the other players like Jack Kramer and so on, Gonzalez is another one, we all came from the public parks. Eventually, we got to the point where we could play at the clubs. They would like us to play, but initially, it stemmed from the public parks.
Did your good professional coaching come after your 33 junior win?
Yes. My brother got me started a little bit, how to hold the racket and so on, but we mostly played. And after I won the national juniors, a fellow by the name of Tom Stowe, who was the coach of the University of California team, saw a few loose ends in my game. He wanted to help me with my serve and my net play, which wasn't up to the rest of my ground strokes. And Tom and I worked for about 3 winters. After the summer and the season was over, we worked diligently over a 3 or 4 months winter period, trying to polish up some of the rusty edges on my game.
You went from the juniors into senior competition, and I think by 1935 you'd arrived at 6th in national ratings. How is that possible?
No, you're wrong on that one, Bud. My first year East, it was in 1934, and I was ranked number 9. Then the next year I was ranked number 2, and then from that point on I was number 1.
You won the U.S. doubles in 1936. Was that your first national championship?
Well, next to the national junior championships, I also won the national clay court doubles before that with Gene Mako. That was in 1934.
Your big years, however, were as yet to come.
Right.
And tell us a little about 37. That was your first of your 2 very big years. Do you recall your various sets on the way up that year?
Well, not all of them, Bud. I remember this, though, that I went through the Wimbledon tournament with a loss of only 1 set in 1937. I lost that one to well, as a matter of fact, I don't remember who I lost that set to on the way along, but I beat Von Cram in the finals in 3 straight sets. Then went on to win our national championships by beating Cram again in the finals in 5 sets. And, of course, the 2 tournaments out in California, the Pacific Southwest and Pacific Coast, were also annexed by me. And, of course, one of the big things that year was winning the Davis Cup. Tilden and his team lost it in 1927 to the 4 French Musketeers, Cochet, Lacoste, Boitron, Brugnon, and it was 11 years before we finally won it back. And the Americans beat Germany in the interzone final at Wimbledon, and then we went on to beat England in the challenge round. And of course, that was a great thrill for us. They had a ticker tape parade down Fifth Avenue in New York, celebrating the return of the Davis Cup after such a long absence.
I think your win at Wimbledon in the men's singles was also a particular United States triumph, was it not?
Well, in a way, no, because Ellsworth Vines had won Wimbledon and then lost his Davis Cup matches. Sidney Wood won Wimbledon, lost his Davis Cup matches, and I, after winning Wimbledon in 37 in singles, doubles, and mixed doubles, I thought, now let's see if I can rise above Ellsworth Vines and Sidney Wood by winning my Davis Cup matches. And it looked very doubtful for a while in the interzone final against Cram. We were the number 1 and 2 players in the world, and we were playing the 5th and deciding match of this tie. And I had beaten Cram the week before in 3 straight sets in the Wimbledon final, and on this occasion I was down 2 sets to love, managed to tie it up at 2 sets apiece, then was behind 4-1 in the 5th set, but managed to finally win it 8-6, which was a touch-and-go affair until that last point was won, believe me.
Is there a scoreboard working in your mind as you play?
Well, you're naturally aware of the score, Bud, but what happened to me during this match was that at 4-1 in the 5th set, I was down. I figured I'm going to have to do something different because I was getting a little bit of the worst of the exchange. So I won my serve to make it 4-2. Now Cram is serving, and this is where I changed my game. I felt that if he missed his first serve, I was going to attack his second serve and come in behind it into the net. Fortunately, he missed 4 first serves in a row that missed only by a few inches, and I made 4 good returns of serve that were deep. He tried to pass me, and I made 4 winners to break his serve at love. Now I'm back in the match at 3-4. Everything is following on serve. So it went back and forth until finally, after my 5th match point, I managed to win the thing 8-6.
And in 37, you received a very special honor, the James E. Sullivan Memorial Trophy. Could you tell us a little about that?
Well, I'm very proud of that one. It's sitting right behind you there on the pedestal, Bud. That represents the outstanding amateur athlete in the United States. And for some strange reason, I'm the only tennis player that's ever gotten this award.
I was going to say that. Can you mention some of the other people that did get it in those adjacent years?
Well, yes, Bob Mathias got it
The decathlon.
for the Olympic decathlon champion. Rayford Johnson got it as a track star. He was also an Olympic decathlon champion. I think Jesse Owens got it, who was the terrific track star. Most of the winners and recipients have been track stars rather than other sports, but the Davis Cup was such a great win for the United States, plus my having won a few of the other tournaments, I guess they decided to give it to me. And it's usually based on the sports writers voting on the outstanding amateur athlete in the United States. And I did get that vote from the newspaper writers and along with the Sullivan Award Committee.
Well, your use of the word amateur is very important then, because everything was amateurs in important tennis in those days. Am I correct?
Well, it was important. The professional game was important also for the two top players who were making big money. But of course, now the professional game is much more important. There are many more matches going. But amateur tennis was where a player gained his reputation. If he didn't do it as an amateur, he wasn't going to get it as a professional, that's for sure. So the amateur situation was the big one that got the name for you.
Neither Wimbledon nor Forest Hills were opens in those days.
No.
Strictly amateurs. Well, 38 was, of course, a vintage year all the way around. There was a young boy star in Boys Town, the hit picture of the year by the name of Mickey Rooney. And the Pulitzer Prize for Drama was given to Our Town. Academy Award went to You Can't Take It With You. Television was beginning. Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant were making movies together, the latest Bringing Up Baby. And there was one other very large achievement, this one in the field of athletics, and I'll save you blushes by saying I believe this was the first Grand Slam in tennis. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct, Bud. 1938 started off, I was going down to Australia to try to win the first leg of the Grand Slam. No one knew that I really wanted to do this. Gene Mako, my doubles partner, knew that I was trying to do this, but I made him promise that he wouldn't talk about it. I didn't want anyone to know about it, because when you start talking about something, usually it backfires on you, or something goes wrong, or everyone's trying extra hard to beat you if they know what you're trying to do. So Ellsworth Vines said, Don, if you go down to Australia, you're going to be so tired, they work you to death down there, that you won't be worth anything for the rest of the year, as much so as if you didn't go. So I profited by his experience, and I played in the two tournaments down there. The first one, the Victorian Championships in Melbourne, and I went right through it without the loss of a set. Then we played a lot of test matches, which didn't mean a darn thing to me. It was just more or less like a trial run for a Davis Cup match, but it was more or less an exhibition. I think out of the 11 or 12 test matches I played, I only won one of them, which wasn't an impressive record, of course, but I didn't really care. I made up my mind I would profit by Ellie Vines's remark saying they're going to play you to death. So I relaxed, enjoyed the tennis I played. I didn't care whether I won or lost. So by the time the Nationals came around in January, I was so eager and so anxious to hit the ball that I could hardly wait for it to hit the ground. And once again, I went through the Australian Championships without the loss of a set. So I won the two tournaments, and I came back fresher than when I went down. But thanks to Ellsworth Vines, I didn't tire myself out by trying my hardest in all those test matches that they had arranged.
Now, that was Australia. What was the next leg of the Grand Slam?
The next leg was in France at Roland Garros, and that, of course, was the first time I'd ever played in the French Championships. And they have a beautiful stadium, as you know, and played on a slow surface like en tout cas. It's a crushed brick dust, which is a little slower than the hard true or clay courts that we have in our country. But once again, things were good to me, and I managed to go through the tournament. I lost 2 sets winning it, but beat Roderick Menzel in the finals in 3 straight sets. That was the second leg. Then the third leg, of course, was Wimbledon, where once again I was lucky enough to win all 3 events there. And then, of course, the last leg was our national championships, where I played my strangely enough, doubles partner Gene Mako in the finals. He had some great wins. He beat Frank Kovacs, the Californian, who was up and coming then, and also John Bromwich, who was the big threat to get to the finals against me, but Mako put him out in the semis. So Mako and I played in the finals there, and that was the fourth leg of the Grand Slam.
Was it 37 or 38 when you were accused of breaching royal etiquette at Wimbledon?
No, that was in 1935, my first year over, Bud. We were well schooled as to what to do if a member of the royal family arrived. And right in the middle of a point, I was playing Bunny Austin in the quarterfinals. And right in the middle of this point, everyone started to stand up, and I was about to hit an overhead or a forehand or something. I knew something was happening, and I realized then that a member of the royal family was arriving. So what I did, I had a habit of wiping my forehead on my short sleeve. So I went like this and turned around and faced the royal box. Well, it looked like I might have said hi, or hi, Queenie, as the report goes. Well, it was a good story, and it went all around the world, and people always asked me, were you so flustered that you waved to the Queen and said hi, Queenie, to her? And I had to say, no, I didn't, but they didn't believe me. But a few years later, when I was presented to Queen Mary, she turned to me and she said, Mr. Budge, you know, I didn't see you when you waved at me in 1935, but had I would have waved back, which I thought was a pretty cute ending to that story that was in the newspapers.
What were some of the exciting things that happened to you abroad as a very young American?
Well, one of the big thrills in 1938, playing in France, Russell Kingman, who was, I think, the treasurer of the USLTA at that time, was a great friend of Pablo Casals, the great renowned cellist. And he brought Pablo out to the tennis every day during the French championships, and we would wind up having tea together after I'd played my matches. And after I had won the tournament, we were having tea, and Pablo said to me, Don, he said, you brought me so much pleasure. I would like very much to have you come to my apartment tonight for dinner, and I would like to play for you. So, of course, I accepted, and we had a beautiful dinner. He had a lovely apartment, and after dinner, we climbed up a circular staircase into a music room, and he had a slanting roof, and we all sat on the floor on cushions, and in the distance, you could see the Eiffel Tower, and Pablo had a pianist to accompany him, and before the concert started, he said, ladies and gentlemen, he said, Mr. Budge has just won the French championships in tennis, and he's brought me so much pleasure that I want to play for him, and tonight this concert is for him alone, and for you who are also here along with him. And that was a great thrill for me because Pablo, I think, is considered probably was the world's greatest instrumentalist. As a matter of fact, Russell Kingman said, Don, you're a good friend of Benny Goodman's. He said, just for fun, ask him who he thinks is the greatest instrumentalist in the world. So when I saw Benny later on in the States, I said, Benny, I've got a music question to ask you. I said, in your opinion, classical, modern, whatever, jazz, who would you say is considered the greatest instrumentalist in the world? He said, well, Don, he said, I know you're interested in jazz very much. He said, there's probably some guy you never heard of. His name is Pablo Casals. So Russell Kingman was right, and I told him the story afterwards, and he said, well, I was pretty sure he'd say that.
Benny Goodman, I should have mentioned when I was reviewing 1938 because he was only a couple of years into his ascendancy there, I believe.
Yes, he was.
He had them dancing in the aisles of the Paramount in 1936, I remember.
I think that's just about right, yes.
This is Reminiscent Day. Tell me about the Davis Cup training. Is it true, or was it an earlier period, that the Davis Cup team used to have its final practices on the deck of a ship?
No. I think one of the ships did have a tennis court on it that Helen Wills, Moody, Rourke, and so forth used to cross on, and she would go out and have a hit en route to England. But those of us who went over by boat, which we usually did in 35, 6, and 7, and even 38, rather than flying, there was no tennis court aboard, but we were very glad to get a 5 or 6 day rest on the boat in between important tennis events.
Now, talking about shipboard, one thinks inevitably of romance. You were very young at that period, however. You won your first championship, I think, at age 22. Were you romantically inclined in those days, or were you keeping training?
Well, no, there was no one at that point that I thought marriage was indicated. But you have a few girlfriends and so on. But I was more dedicated to tennis. I felt that I wanted to be the best player in the world, and everything I did then was prefaced by saying, is this good for your tennis or bad? And if it was bad, I wouldn't do it. If it was good for my tennis or what I thought was good, then I would go along those lines. So, I had a few girlfriends, of course, but tennis was really my main objective along those lines.
How did you make out? I'm using it in the old sense, not the current sense, with mixed doubles.
Well, very well. Of course, I had some great partners in Sarah Palfrey, Fabian, Cook, and now Danzig, and also with Alice Marble. Of course, Alice Marble was played more like a man than any of the girls that I've seen, including Billie Jean King and Helen Wills or Pauline Betts or some of those. Alice could take her overheads and put them away along with the best of men's overheads. So she was easy to play with. We had no problem at all winning Wimbledon twice and our national championships a couple of times, and it was really a lark playing with her. But I really enjoyed mixed doubles probably as much, if not more so, than some of the other aspects of tennis, singles or whatever, because it was fun when you had a good girl partner. And although there was no romance between any of us, it was fun to play with a nice person.
And you did some tours with mixed groups, I believe.
Yes, just one. Bill Tilden and I played on a tour in 1941, and we played the feature match, but the girls were involved, Alice Marble and Mary Hardwick, who's now married to Charlie Hare, so is Mary Hardwick Hare. And we had a great tour. It was a lot of fun.
I'm glad you keep up on the various marriages of all these tennis stars.
Well, not all of them.
Your mentioning of Tilden, and I don't know whether we'll have enough room on this tape, we may have to go to the next one, brings up the inevitable discussions of who was the greatest tennis player that ever lived, what are the rankings of all time tennis players in numerical order, could Jimmy Connors play Bill Johnson, etc. And I believe you've recently put your head in a noose, or at least in a hot situation, by rating Tilden pretty far down.
Not too far down. I've sort of reevaluated Bill, but after seeing some of these present-day players playing more than one or two matches, originally I had him, I think, down around number 8 or so. But now looking at it, I still would put Tilden behind Vines, Kramer, Fred Perry, Gonzalez, and probably Laver. After that, I think Tilden would probably beat the rest of these fellows because he could return serve so well, and he had a fine serve himself. But he did have a weakness in his game in that he wasn't as strong at the net position as a lot of the players I've just mentioned. So I feel, in a sense, he could have been vulnerable. But here's another thing that I've had to change in evaluating some of the players today. You take Rod Laver. He doesn't have the best serve in the world, nor the best forehand, nor the best backhand, nor the best net game. He's good in everything. Connors doesn't have the best serve, the best forehand, backhand, forehand, or net play. He's good all around. But Tilden had the best serve, he had the best forehand, and he had great conditioning. So he had 3 pluses. Vines had the best serve in the world, the best forehand, the best net game, and I would say the best overhead, but let's say 3 pluses. Kramer had the best serve, the best forehand, and the best net game, 3 pluses. Fred Perry had a great forehand, the greatest, and he had great condition and speed of foot. Let's say 2.5 pluses. Gonzalez had 1 plus, really. He had the best serve, but outside of that, none of his shots would be picked as a composite shot. So some of the past players, because of their pluses, I think have to be put ahead of the players that don't have any big pluses to their game, to their name.
Well, it's interesting to me, Don, that you have mentioned only strokes. You haven't mentioned the cerebral element at all. Would you care to mention that?
Well, I don't think most players do much thinking when they're out on the court, Bud. Occasionally they will change their tactics if they're losing, like happened with me with Cram in the Davis Cup when I decided I'd come to the net if he missed his first serve. That's the cerebral aspect of it, I suppose. But on the main, it's usually your game that's mapped out ahead of time that you're going to follow. And if everything goes according to your plan, you'll wind up winning the match. I always felt that I would play a certain way, and if my game was a little bit off, I missed a few backhands, which usually was my bread and butter stroke, I could also outlast my opponents and beat them on condition. And this was a very important aspect. But I think on the main, Tilden used more means to try to distract an opponent. I had long talks with Bill when we traveled around Europe and so on, and Bill said when I started a match, I would naturally try to beat my opponent with my racket. But he said if my opponent had a particularly good day and I was a little bit off, he said, and I was losing, I would try to distract him. I would do everything in the world to try to upset him by stalling or by having linesmen removed on bad calls or what I thought was a bad call. And he said then if I didn't win, he said, well, I figured I did everything I could to try to win the match, but I'd try to get him the next time. But most players that I know and have played against, like Von Cram or Vines or Kramer or players of that nature, they played the game and hit the ball the best way they knew how, but they didn't try to upset you by doing this, that, or the other thing that as Tilden did.
Well, now a contemporary of yours, I believe he was a contemporary, has always taken great stock in psyching the other guy out, Bobby Riggs.
Well, Bobby, I guess, has psyched out a lot of people. He never bothered me because I felt that if I was on my game, anything he did wouldn't bother me, which didn't. And I always felt that if I was on my game, there was only one outcome in a match with Riggs, and that was to beat him, because if I made my first move well enough ahead of his countering that move, nothing he could do about it, because I always felt a good offense would always beat a good defense.
But what are some of the things that he did? Anything amusing?
Well, he would...
I mean, to other people, not to you.
Well, for example, I always controlled the play against Bobby and would run him ragged in a match. But let's say we had one long point. We're playing in 95, 98 degree weather, and he's tired and winded. So now he's serving, and he has one ball in his hand, and he wants the second ball to start his serve. Well, now he knows the ball boy behind him has the ball, but he'll look across the way to a ball boy saying, let me have a ball, and so on, knowing full well that the ball boy behind him is waiting to throw one to him. But in the meantime, he's catching his breath, and finally, after a minute or two, he may walk around in a circle and go to the ball boy or behind him that has the ball and get a ball and then come back to serve. Well, if it doesn't bother you, I'll say, well, this is a rest period for me too, so I'll just wait until he's ready. But some players get excited and upset. They say, oh my gosh, here I'm going along well, and he's stalling the play, and they get upset. And the first thing you know, their whole play is disintegrating right in front of them. So these are the things that Bobby would do. He's done other things too, but they never bothered me.
Well, then one of your elements besides stroke would be cool.
Or concentration, just not letting anything bother you. Right, I guess you'd say cool. Like Arthur Ashe, I think is one of the best exponents of being cool on the court. Nothing seems to bother him, although...
Unless it's Nastasi.
Well, Nastasi does get to him a little bit, but he's made up his mind that he's not going to let it be shown that he's bothered. And I'd say Arthur is about as cool a customer today as you'll find on the tennis court. Rod Laver, of course, is another one. Rosewall is another good one. They don't let things bother them as much as, say, a Nastasi or a Connors or some of the other players that we know about.
Now, Laver's come into the conversation in the last minute or so. Was he the first one to break your Grand Slam record?
Yes, he tied it as an amateur and then won it as a professional. But I would like to say, Bud, in defense of that, in 1939, when I turned professional, I won the championships of the United States, France, and England, and we were on our way to Australia when war broke out. And I think I would have done it again. I might not have, but at least the way things were going, it looks like I might have done that. But so I kind of had the misfortune of having the war intervene on the fourth leg of that second Grand Slam that I would, of course, like to have won.
the war years really cut into your amateur years, or do you think they cut into your professional years?
No, they cut into my professional years because I turned professional in 39. And as you remember, the war broke out in September 2 or 3 of 1939 when we were in England. So it hurt my professional career, although uh, uh, I had several tours after that, one with Tilden and that group, and then another one a year later with Fred Perry, Frank Kovacs, and Bobby Riggs, which finally was terminated because then it was 1943 and we were getting into the war and we all went into the service. So that was the last tennis tour I was on. But the war came about right when I was on the top of my game, which was unfortunate, but at least I'm alive today and we won the war and have a few dollars in the bank and things seem to be going well, so I can't complain.
Was it Jack Kramer who pulled you into the professional game?
No, it was Ellsworth Vines. Ellsworth Vines was the professional champion for 5 years running, and I challenged him and beat him, and then beat Fred Perry, and went on to beat Riggs and some of those players that also turned later on.
Well, now tell me, if I ask anything that's too impertinent, you can always refrain from answering. Where did Laurie come into the picture?
Well, Laurie came in about 12 years ago. We met, and we were both married at the time to someone else, but things weren't going along as well for either of us as we would like. And I think both of us thought we were in love with our present wives and husbands, but as it turned out, we got along so well together. My former wife had a career of her own that she wanted to pursue in writing. Her father was a writer, developed and introduced the Ellis Cinders comic strip, and then later went on to movie scenarios and so on. And she wanted to follow a writing career, which didn't dovetail with a tennis career where you had to travel a lot and be separated. So we were apart enough where finally Laurie and I realized that we were missing out by not being married ourselves, and divorces were starting before that a little bit anyway. So after we both got divorced, we both got married, and we've never been happier.
I know that she likes to follow the sun with you. Is she a tennis player also?
Well, she's known as the right Budge in many circles of our friends. They don't care whether I show up, but as long as she shows up, that's the main thing. But she's been playing about 7 or 8 years now, and she has darn good strokes. But naturally, not having started earlier, she couldn't expect to be a tournament player. But she loves to play, and we play mixed doubles and a lot of matches with our friends, not tournaments, of course. But anyway, she enjoys it, and I enjoy trying to help her improve.
But you still do play tournaments?
Yes, I do. I've been playing it in the Wimbledon veterans doubles now that they've gone open, and I still have one more event there that I want to win, and that's the veterans doubles one more time, because I want to win it at least twice. I've won it once, and I've won all the other titles twice, so I'd like to win the veterans twice. So I have one more title to go before equaling that, which would be kind of fun. There are only 3 players that have ever won all 3 events at Wimbledon, but myself, Frank Sedgman, and Bobby Riggs. But I still have the distinction of being the only person who's done it twice. So that's a nice record to kind of fall back on.
And you still play at Forest Hills?
Well, I haven't played in the veterans events there, but I played in some of the Hall of Fame matches or the pro celebrity things and so on, and so forth. So I do like to play. I did play in the Grand Masters singles and doubles tournament down in South Africa just about a month and a half or 2 months ago. And I thought, gee, I haven't played in a singles tournament for 6 or 7 years. And then I started thinking about it, and it was 21 years ago that I played in my last singles tournament. And I played against Gonzalez, Sedgman, and Tom Brown and some of those fellas. And I was very pleased because, not having played in the singles tournament for 21 years, I played Gonzalez and lost to him 6-4, 7-5, which was pretty darn close. And I thought that was a pretty good effort, not having played for 21 years in the singles tournament.
He's got you by a few years, hasn't he?
Yes. Pancho's about 13 years younger than I am, I guess.
Now, just one more thing before we get back to personalities and wind it up, because I don't want to take advantage of you. I'd like to get back to that all-time rating. Is it true that they once did a computer test on who would have won if they put Bill Tilden and Jimmy Connors and everybody in a glass jar and shook them up?
Connors wasn't in it, Bud. They did do a computer tournament. I think they fed all the statistics of the players that I'll mention into the statistics of wins, losses, and how many years they played. They had Tilden, Kramer, Gonzalez, Fines, Riggs, Perry, Cochet, Laver, Rosewall, and I can't think of any more at this point. But they had 32 players in this tournament, and it boiled down to where they had Tilden and me playing in the finals, and with my beating Bill in 5 sets in the finals. Of course, I have to think the computer's right, and that's the way it should be. But I know Allison Danzig wouldn't agree with that one because he's a great Tilden advocate, as I am too. Bill was a marvelous player, and he could well have been the greatest player of all time. But the computer said no. So I'll go along with the computer for this point anyway.
Well, I think millions of tennis fans will also pay tribute to Tilden as the first great American player, and just as many millions will go along with the computer that had you all played at your peak at the same year, that Don Budge would have come out ahead.
You know, Bud, one of my biggest thrills now that I've turned professional, at the 1939 New York World's Fair, they had a gold laurel wreath award, which was awarded to the outstanding outstanding athlete in the world. And Captain Eddie Rickenbacker introduced Babe Ruth, who made the presentation to me, which I thought was a great award and something that hasn't been talked about. But when you're given this award, especially by one of my heroes, Babe Ruth, and we had a chance to talk for about a half an hour before the ceremony, which was marvelous because I would talk to him about baseball, and he would answer my question and then say, "Well, now what about Tilden?" He said, "Tell me." He said, "I saw him play, and he didn't like to play net very much, did he?" And I said, "Well, not as much as in the baseline." I'd say, "Well, tell me, how did it feel when you hit that 60th home run?" And he'd answer that, and then go back to tennis again. So he was quite well versed on what was happening in other sports in addition to baseball.
Is the tangible evidence of that honor in that beautiful velvet box over there?
No, it isn't. This is the Grand Slam bracelet. It has 6 of my Wimbledon medals on it, and also a gold medal for winning our national championships, one for Australia and one from France. And of course, Mrs. Budge has a bracelet in it, and I'll let you hold it to show you how heavy the thing is.
Oh, better lock the doors.
Yes, it's of course, intrinsically, it's not worth as much as it is emotionally to me or to Mrs. Budge, because it's something you can't replace. And by that I mean this: Bobby Riggs won 3 of those same medals in 1939 when I turned professional, and he gave them to his wife, and they were stolen out of their hotel room once in a travel. And so when Bobby went back to England the next time, he said he'd like to have 3 more medals made up, and of course pay for them, but because they were stolen, they said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Riggs, but the foundry that made those was bombed out during the war and the molds were destroyed, so they'll never be able to duplicate them again."
Well, I once had my hand on the Gutenberg Bible, and now this completes the score. They're beautiful.
Yes, it is.
And as you say, even their intrinsic value, which must be enormous, is secondary. Now, one last question. You have a tennis camp down in Baltimore in the summer?
Yes, we do. It's called the Don Budge Tennis Campus, strangely enough. And we usually have over 300 kids, been about 317, 320 kids over the summer. We have 3 3-week sessions, boys and girls 10 to 18. And it's an awful lot of fun for me because we have a great counseling staff. We've gotten fine college players from all over the country to be our counselors, and I run them through an indoctrination course a week ahead of time, so we're all talking the same language. And it really works out very well, and we're at a wonderful place called McDonough School, which is just outside of Baltimore, and the facilities are marvelous there, so we're there every summer.
Now, is this wide open, or is this only for people that show considerable promise of national tournaments ahead.
No, this is for boys and girls, whether they're beginners, intermediates, or advanced players. We've had quite a few beginners, and everyone has to start somewhere. I had to too. So you get kids that are now really loving to play tennis and seeing so much of it on TV and matches in person that we're enjoying the luxury of actually having to refuse the applicants because we're all full.
Now, are your Mexican winters professional, or is that relaxation time?
No, that's professional. Normally, we would be down in Acapulco by now. We're usually there at the Club Tres Vidas, but they've had a few reorganization problems, such as money, and I think the way it looks now, we'll be heading down there around the 1st of January throughout the rest of the winter.
So when do you relax?
Well, we have about a 3 months period in between when we come back from Acapulco, which is around the end of April, until our camp starts. That gives us about 5 or 6 weeks in between Acapulco and our camp, and we have about another 5 or 6 weeks after our camp ends before we have to go back to Acapulco again. And we usually do some traveling then and so on.
Well, now that your hair is no longer red, I'm glad that you're taking life easy that way.
Well, I'm not taking it that easy. I'm involved in a lot of projects here around the house. I'm a fix-it man. I like to build stone walls, which you can see out here. I saved myself about $5,000 by doing that because that was the estimate we got. But I still like to keep my hand in tennis to a certain extent because health is a very important aspect of my life, and I want to stay in reasonably good shape by playing in a few tennis events here and there and sort of keep my hand in.
Well, I was trying to be funny. I've never seen a more active man, nor a more pleasant one.
Well, thank you, Bud, and I can say the same for you, and please come back again.